I recall learning about the renowned precursor races, who divided the galaxy among themselves. The same celestials who sponsored countless lesser races and facilitated their ascent to the stars. The celestials who engaged in a cataclysmic war, nearly eradicating all life in the galaxy. Though the celestials are long gone, lost to memory, a byproduct of their devastating war, their legacy endures. I am one of the archivists, an elder race, sponsored by a precursor race so deeply shrouded in history that even its name eludes us. We hold an honored position in the galaxy as the keepers of history, the last of the races directly influenced by the celestials. For millennia, we have roamed the stars, seeking out others from the galaxy's early ages, and hunting down the lost relics of those who came before. Relics of knowledge and destruction. The knowledge of these relics is closely guarded, and for good reason. The power the celestials wielded could shatter the galaxy if it were to fall into the wrong hands. If only we had truly understood the weapons the celestials used, we might have been able to prevent the calamity. In the year 1361 by the Galactic Standard, or 3205 Earth Standard, Terrans was discovered by a survey team scouting for what was believed to be a weapon of untold destructive power. The team found nothing of note aside from the new race, which remained unaware of the galactic community and was merely to be observed until the High Council could decide how to handle first contact. The team's failure to uncover anything should have been our initial warning. Instead, we were so fixated on learning more about this new arrival to the galactic stage and its surprisingly warlike tendencies, multiple worlds, and disunited factions that we overlooked what is obvious in hindsight. Terrans had carved out a small corner of the universe for itself and was in the process of consolidating its power in this region when we found it. Multiple mineral-rich worlds, coupled with the adaptability and resilience of the humans, had led them into a golden era, even as they competed amongst themselves, the competition pushing their advances ever forward. Despite this golden age of prosperity and advancement, Terrans was lagging behind the galactic standard in terms of technology. This was an advantage the Marauders, a race of predators, were keen to exploit. Shortly after the discovery of Terrans, the Marauders launched a massive assault against the unsuspecting humans, citing the need of the mineral-rich systems as justification. First contact for humanity was one of fire and blood, as the Marauders massacred them relentlessly wherever they were found. For the next 5 years, the humans were pursued relentlessly by Marauder swarm ships and execution squads, as they were slowly driven back to their homeworld of Earth. The war for minerals had become a genocide as the Marauders drove them to the verge of humanity's extinction. Even as the Marauders had slaughtered them, the resilience of humans was proven time and time again, as they would rage hopelessly and futilely against the limitless tide of Marauder forces pouring over their worlds. And on the verge of humanity's extinction, we finally saw what we had been right under our noses this whole time. In the 6th year of the Marauders' human war, humanity had been pushed back to Earth, and less than 20 billion of them still survived. Their first contact had been 6 years of the most desperate war they had ever fought, and their last stand would be in defense of Earth, their home. 5 years of rage finally came to a head when the first Marauder ship entered the Sol system. 5 years of desperation and fear reached its height when humanity realized it had run out of time and space to find shelter in. 5 years of last stands, defiant counterattacks, and sacrifice. 5 years of war created a potent mix, and that first Marauder ship that threatened Earth lit a fire unlike anything we had ever seen. The Celestials had wielded weapons of terrible power in their wars with each other, weapons capable of wiping entire systems clean of life. We had assumed these weapons would be megastructures, super ships capable of harnessing the power of stars as weapons and the like. As humanity's options dwindled, and they were left with no choice but to fight, only then did we realize how mistaken our assumptions had been. Humanity's collective rage, driven by desperation, erupted, and they surged forth from Sol with a fury unlike anything we had witnessed before. The Marauders' advanced fleet was destroyed moments after entering Sol, and soon after, human ships emerged from warp into systems previously thought secure. That day, the galaxy was taught true fear. We saw that what we had called war and genocide was merely a border skirmish compared to what the humans would do. Human battleships warped directly into marauder swarm formations, casting aside caution and launching suicidal attacks. The fury of Terrans and their counterattack was immeasurable, and the vengeance they exacted for their fallen was staggering. Marauders Prime, the heart of an undefeated empire, was reduced to ash as human dreadnoughts delivered an orbital bombardment that cracked the planet's core and ignited its atmosphere. Their suicidal assault caught the Marauders off guard and tore their fleets apart. Even as human ships were destroyed, they took many hundreds more Marauder ships with them, their power cores detonating in devastating explosions that rent the fleets asunder. The human Marauder War lasted 6 years and 4 months, ending with the total extinction of the Marauders. Over 400 billion lives were lost, and we found the truth. The Celestials had not wielded anything as crude as starships or planetary weapons, nor had they harnessed the power of stars to defeat their enemies. No, the Celestials had fielded races, weapons made flesh and turned loose against their foes. In a cataclysmic war, the Celestials and their weapons had destroyed themselves entirely, except the humans had survived. The last of the weapons of the Celestials still lived, and they had managed to survive once more, reclaiming their heritage at the edge of extinction. We thought we knew war, and we thought we understood the motives of the Celestials. Now we understand that we are very small children in a galaxy where weapons are races and the edges of the map have yet to be filled in. The conclusion of the First Contact War had exacted a heavy toll. 66 billion human lives were lost, leaving a mere 17 billion survivors. In addition to the staggering death toll, humanity, once spread across 12 star systems, now fought to maintain its grip on the Sol system. The colonies on Luna, Mars, Ceres, Io, Callisto, Titan, and Enceladus, along with the asteroid mining facilities in the main asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt, were all that remained of Terran presence beyond Earth. The once formidable defense fleet had been reduced to a single supercarrier and 3 dreadnoughts. Struggling to survive the devastating war, the once plentiful factions of humanity have consolidated into 2 main groups, the Restorers and the Reclamationists. The Restorers is focused on rebuilding and seeks to repair the damage done to the Sol system during the war while fortifying it against further attack. The Reclamationist is expansionist and believes that resources would be better spent reclaiming the territory lost in the war. Having assimilated the factions that had survived the war, both groups have considerable influence, and a Cold War has begun as they vie for dominance. The survivors of the defense fleet, once funded by the multitude of factions and colonies, have banded together and created the Terran Armada, an entity that represents humanity as a whole, and draws its funding, troops, and equipment from all aspects of humanity. Separate from both the Restorers and the Reclamationists, the TSF is the only reason open war has been avoided thus far, as they have made it abundantly clear that they will not tolerate conflict. Reeling from the cost of the war, humanity struggles to rebuild and is wrought with internal problems caused by their victory. The First Contact War was unquestionably unwinnable. The Marauders were more technologically advanced and had far more numbers. Despite this, when pushed to the brink of extinction, humanity was able to rally and counterattack, driving the Marauders out of Sol before retaliating with a fury unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Marauders Prime, the birthplace of the Marauder civilization, had been destroyed in an orbital bombardment that had shattered the continents and ignited the atmosphere. Other worlds under the Marauders' dominion met comparable ends, as the humans who survived had purged them from the galaxy. Despite humanity's efforts, the Marauders had endured the war, but were consigned to a slow demise, their numbers too low to sustain their population. Over time, the Marauders would eventually die out, the survivors turning to lives as mercenaries and pirates, swearing eternal vengeance on the humans who had destroyed their empire and people. Likewise, the humans were not content with an unfinished task, and in a twist of fate, deployed human death squads to hunt down and eliminate any surviving Marauders. This became the new norm for humanity. Far more concerning to humanity than the survival of the Marauders or the brewing Cold War were the reasons they managed to turn aside the Marauders' assault on Sol and later defeat them entirely. To uncover the truth behind their triumph, the TSF began to examine the recordings of the defense of Seoul. Military analysts pored over weeks of data and formulated theories from the slightest evidence. It took almost 3 months before the finest military minds stumbled upon a signal, emitted across the entire Seoul system shortly after the arrival of the first Marauder ship in the system, which was almost immediately dismissed as unimportant. A second matching signal was later discovered shortly after the human counterattack had smashed through the Marauder's prime defense fleet. Fundamentally, a Marauder swarm carrier would enter a system via warp and begin transmitting a signal that acted as both a guiding beacon for other Marauder ships in warp and as a jamming signal that forced any ships not of Marauders design attempting to enter warp to exit at a position near the swarm ship. This carrier was protected by countless swarm ships, which served as a physical shield to protect it. Actively damaging the carrier was nearly impossible, as even seconds after it had arrived in a system, it was effectively obscured from sight by a living wall of Marauders-linked ships. The only reason Terrans ever learnt of this tactic was because of a stroke of remarkable fortune. Commander Valerian, commanding officer of the Archer-class corvette Vanguard, was performing a routine patrol of the Arcadia system when a Marauder swarm carrier dropped out of warp. Fortunately for the crew of the Vanguard, luck had caused the swarm carrier to drop out of warp almost on top of the corvette, finding themselves within the carrier's defensive swarm ships. The Archer-class corvette is equipped with 4 Annihilator railguns, 2 Predator missile launchers, and a Guardian Point defense system. The corvette's quad-barrel railguns and EMP missiles gave it the firepower to overwhelm most enemy forces. Being inside the defensive shield of the carrier, the Vanguard was afforded a unique opportunity. Opening fire on the carrier, Captain Knight and his crew managed to cripple the Marauder ship to the point where it was possible to use the warp drive to escape, claiming a valuable victory for humanity and turning the Vanguard and all those aboard it into symbols for humanity to rally behind. As such, it was the Vanguard that met the Marauder swarm ships when they entered Seoul, and it was the Vanguard that led the human fleet, what was left of it, into battle above Marauder's prime nearly 4 months later. The fact that the Vanguard had survived such dangerous conflicts and been alone when it had crippled the carrier in Arcadia earned it the distinction of leading the investigation into the signal's origin and purpose. The purpose of the signal was widely known, but remained a source of contention for humanity nonetheless. Once the data had rolled in concerning the timing of the 2 broadcasts of the signal, explanations had fallen into place almost immediately, at the cost of even more troubling questions coming to light. A closely guarded secret of the TSF is how humanity was able to defeat the Marauders after having suffered through 5 years of war. The fact that the signal had been broadcast shortly before humanity successfully defended Seoul led to no small amount of questions and shook humanity to the core. When the first Marauder ship had entered Seoul, a rapid evolutionary transformation occurred. Over the course of a few hours, Terrans were upgraded and enhanced. While the description may sound crude, it is the simplest and most accurate way to depict the events. Evolutionary traits that humanity had displayed for centuries were unlocked. Adrenaline, a common enough feature amongst the creatures native to Earth, became more potent to the point where humans experiencing the drug perceived the world around them as almost frozen. Other traits were recorded having been enhanced as well, including pain resistance, recovery rate, strength, and speed, often far exceeding normal human limitations. Able to react with unprecedented speed, often shifting their focus before targeting systems could adapt, humans were now empowered with unique abilities such as telekinesis, telepathy, mind control, elementalism, and precognition. Coupled with their other enhanced capabilities, they could fight back against the Marauders like never before. The Marauders' standard tactic for destroying a human fleet was simplicity itself. Engulf the human ships in a never-ending wave of Marauders-linked ships. It didn't matter how many Marauders you killed or how many ships you destroyed. Entire fleets would empty out their ammunition reserves, holding Marauders' swarm fleets at bay before finally depleting their last stocks and being overwhelmed by the seemingly endless tide. The discovery of their new abilities changed that, able to react faster than ever before, often changing targets before the targeting computers could realize, and empowered with abilities out of a fantasy novel. humanity was able to defeat the Marauders' incursion into Sol and begin a devastating counterattack. Marauders Prime had been the last of the Marauders' worlds to burn. This is where the discovery of the signal, broadcast before and after humanity's counterattack, becomes significant. Just as the initial broadcast coincided with the overnight enhancement of humanity, the second broadcast coincided with the deactivation of their new powers. Captain Knight, aboard the Vanguard with a team of scientists and military analysts, stood in awe at a derelict station, technically in the dark space between solar systems. It was to this station they had followed the signals, and upon arrival discovered a station nearly 10 million years old, long abandoned and damaged, broadcasting a greeting in a language mostly intelligible, save for a single word: human. It has been 3 years since Terrans survived the first contact war with the Marauders by exterminating them. At first, there were concerns that they would adopt a scorched earth policy with other races, and that any chance of peaceful contact was lost. Instead, they withdrew within their diminished borders and set about rebuilding. The races of the universe let out a collective sigh of relief, as the humans would not become a new Marauder empire, eager to conquer and dominate all they encountered. Despite this, much remained unknown about the newcomers, especially how they were able to overcome the Marauders from such a hopeless situation. The earliest theory was that humans were bioengineered weapons, left behind by the precursor races. While dismissed as wild speculation due to lack of evidence, the truth was that the humans had managed to defeat a vastly superior enemy after being pushed back to their homeworld. The one point everyone agreed on was that the humans must have activated an ancient precursor weapon that gave them the advantage. Bioengineered weapons, or in possession of a precursor weapon, both thoughts were equally terrifying to consider. The Celestials had wiped themselves out, along with the vast majority of the galaxy, the last time they had warred amongst themselves. The only good news from the cataclysmic war that had removed them from existence was that it had destroyed almost all of the weapons they had once wielded. If the humans had discovered and activated a precursor relic, it could have spelled the end for countless civilizations. The archivists, keepers of history, were tasked by the Council of Lords, a collection of the galactic community's most powerful races, to investigate the severity of this potential threat. We had previously surveyed human space undetected, and as the last of the elder races directly influenced by the Celestials, we understood the dangers of precursor technology all too well. Our scouts made for Sol, eager to uncover the truth. What they found was unthinkable. The war's aftermath had left human space in ruins, systems choked with the remnants of battle, planets scorched clean of life. Only the fortress worlds were truly irredeemable, their surfaces glassed by the Marauders in a brutal effort to crush human resistance. Yet in stark contrast, the Sol system teemed with activity, fleets of warships patrolling and scavenger drones picking through the debris. We commenced our observations of the humans, relying on our superior technology to remain hidden and unnoticed. If a precursor weapon was under their control, it was likely concealed on their homeworld, guarded heavily. In less than 3 hours, we located the precursor weapon, though its nature continues to elude us. The humans were engaged in reconstruction efforts on the world they call Enceladus, which had previously served as a military research outpost before the Marauders' invasion. We observed an infestation of the Ravagers, the war beasts employed by the Marauders, and expected to see human soldiers battling the pests, perhaps even demonstrating precursor technology. Instead, we witnessed 4 humans protecting a 5th, who was able to eradicate the Ravagers' nest with fire, summoned from their hands in less than an hour. This sight has had a lasting impact, as evidenced by the lingering nightmares. Everywhere we looked, the humans displayed feats that defied expectations, leading us to reconsider the theory that they were bioengineered weapons created by the Celestials. As we submitted our initial reports, we were dismayed to discover that, while the vast majority of humanity had inherited special powers, it was a very small detachment in the human military that policed the superpowered population. These guardians, seemingly among the few humans who had not evolved with the rest of their kind, possessed no powers of their own. Despite this, they were tasked with keeping the rest of the population in line. To this end, they had been genetically modified and cybernetically augmented, as well as trained in conditions that would break anyone without superhuman resolve. The mere observation of the transformations humanity had undergone since the war was profoundly unsettling. They had advanced decades in 9 years and accessed power unlike anything seen before. Worse, the buildup of their military implied that they viewed the outside galaxy hostilely and were preparing to expand again soon. The archivists are the keepers of history and withhold a great many secrets from the rest of the universe. I fear we may have condemned us all when we resolved that humanity could not be allowed to live. I know that countless will die once the swarm learns that we reactivated our side of the jump gate after moving it to the edge of human space. Creatures as powerful as the humans cannot be allowed to expand. The swarm will cleanse their worlds and claim countless lives before we manage to contain them. But if we don't destroy the humans now, while they attempt to recover, we will never be able to. And yet, as we watch the jump gate come to life and link the void to our space once again, I can't help but feel that we've underestimated the humans. I'd be lying if I said we were caught off guard by the arrival of the swarm. It's pretty hard to miss a hypergate appearing out of nowhere when you're as paranoid as humanity was following the First Contact War. I'd also be lying if I said we were prepared for it. We doubled our military forces and funneled countless funds into development of training programs for the new powers humans had. We had been expecting the power vacuum that was caused by the extinction of the Marauders, and it was only logical that Earth would be the first target of whichever race decided to take advantage of the newly freed systems. We remain uncertain how the hypergate reached the edge of human space. Perhaps it had been there all along, unnoticed until the day it was activated, or perhaps it was placed there recently. Regardless, its activation triggered a massive energy spike, giving us less than 4 hours to mobilize our fleets and respond. In that time, the swarm had already devastated the outer colonies, from Enceladus to Neptune. The swarm's assault was unlike anything we had ever witnessed. Unlike the Marauders, whose overwhelming numbers and firepower could be overcome, the swarm was an unstoppable tide. As they poured through the hypergate, they seemed to blot out the very stars themselves. Our fleets could only slow their advance, forced to retreat and surrender all but Earth, Mars, and the Moon. Scout ships made suicidal runs, seeking any weakness in the swarm's armor. One survivor managed to stream a shocking discovery: a single human soldier wielding gravity, manipulating powers, crushing swarmlings by the hundreds before being overwhelmed. But the horror deepened as the swarmlings that consumed him evolved, gaining the same ability. When the feed cut out and the scout ship was destroyed, a hush fell over the high command. They had just witnessed the enemy steal the powers of their own. The revelation was jarring, as each considered how they had ordered the planets evacuated and then abandoned as they attempted to throw up a defense around Earth and Mars. 98% of humanity exhibited powers in some form. If the swarmlings gained the abilities of those they devoured, who knew what powers they had already gathered to supplement their immense speed, strength, and endless numbers? As the swarm fell upon the remaining planets, cutting evacuation protocols short and massacring the humans who were unlucky enough to not be retrieved yet, humanity seemed doomed, bracing itself for a final last stand in defiance of an unbeatable enemy. The last glimmers of hope began to fade, and yet there were some who refused to stop fighting. Kieran sensed the shift in gravity just before he heard the approach of a swarmling. As the Guardian's arm blade slid into position, he couldn't stop himself from feeling a moment of regret. If the swarmling was influencing gravity, it must have killed Alara. No, he couldn't allow himself to get distracted now. Allowing his training to take over, Kieran began to move. Kicking off of the debris he had been using as cover, he launched himself at the swarmling. As fast as he was, he knew that it was just as fast, and it would use its new power to stop him. The soft hum of his mag boots being engaged were drowned out by the squeal of the swarmling as it altered the gravity of the room. Debris slammed into the ceiling, and Kieran felt his center thrown off as gravity attempted to rip him from the floor, his mag boots keeping him in place. Underneath the helmet, he smiled. It didn't know how to use gravity to crush yet, only how to change its focus. The whine of the mag boots grew as Kieran approached the swarmling, which was desperately scrabbling away from him. He felt the gravity lighten as the swarmling overextended its control of the power and surged forward, his arm blade sinking through its skull with ease.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.